A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangu Shampagi. Uganda will be 57 years on Wednesday since attaining independence. So Uganda will celebrate 57 years of independence since 1962 when we attained our independence. And we can say on the show as we begin, we can say Happy Independence Day to Uganda and Happy Independence Day to all of us. What does that mean? We'll be evaluating our journey for 57 years, but on a separate, in a different show. My name is Charles Mwangu Shampagi, and with me in the studio tonight, I have Dicta Simwe. Dicta is a senior writer with the East African newspaper. Dicta, very nice to have you.
Thank you.
I have Kenneth Anderson Lukwago. Kenneth is a producer and journalist with Radio 1. Very nice to have you. And Agatha Atweire, who is an independent journalist and a lawyer. Agatha, very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. We just ended the week that's been somewhat event-packed. We are going into Independence Week. This week will be Independence Week. The journey of Uganda's independence and post-independence has been largely defined by politics. We haven't made much progress on the economic, social, and other areas. We've made a lot of the movement, a lot of the talk has been around our politics. And just last week, the Uganda People's Defense Forces gazetted what it calls its insignia, its badges, and announced what effectively is a ban on one of the political groups, the People Power, from using the red berets that they've been using with a badge. There's been a lot of debate on whether this gazette, this ban, actually has any legal standing, whether it can hold. Yesterday I shared with one of the spokespeople, the deputy spokesperson of the UPDF, a meme that was running on, circulating on WhatsApp. Someone sliced a watermelon, which is red inside and green on the outside, and said UPDF bans.
Fruit?
No, UPDF has gazetted, has gazetted this fruit. Because the debate largely has been, what do you ban? What is offensive? Is it the color red, the color black, the color green, navy blue, maroon, or the badge that defines those colors? What constitutes the army uniform? And the interpretation, of course, has been, are you doing this simply because you're targeting people power? Kenneth, I want to start with you. There are many interpretations to this.
Sure.
What exactly is the UPDF communicating? What is the import of that gazette?
Well, from the interaction I've had on this issue and reading from what the UPDF has been explaining, they seem to suggest that this is not something that has just happened today. They actually say that it's a process that began way long time ago. That it is well catered for even in the UPDF Act, section 164. But then they continue to say that one of the reasons they're actually taking these measures is part of professionalization, because the gazetting did not only stop with the beret that we saw, because I've also seen they have even made badges for the different units, like the infantry, like the artillery. They all have different badges now, if you see what has been published. But then they also say that one of the key reasons they took this measure is because in the recent past, there have been some unscrupulous people who put on clothes that look like the ones of the UPDF, and they have engaged in acts of violence or armed robbery, and this has been directly passed on to the UPDF. So those are some of the reasons they are using to justify. But then, of course, the other side that thinks that this move is really not good, they are saying it's about the timing.
Which is the other side?
The other side I'm talking about is the People Power group that has been using the red beret, because for them they think that the timing is all about them. So I think it's something that the UPDF maybe needs to thoroughly explain, because this coming just a few days after the deputy head of the UPDF reserve, Brigadier, is it called Brigadier One?
Mm-hmm.
When he was addressing members of some youth in Lugogo MTN Arena, did actually say that if you before even the Gazette came out, he had already announced and said, if you see anybody putting on a red beret in your village, report them to the police, or have them arrested, because they are criminals. They are not allowed to use these particular attires. So the timing of the thing,
they put it. That was actually very interesting, because behind Charles Otemawanyi, there was all those yellow chairs, and the contrast couldn't be bigger.
And of course,
you're condemning what has been taken on as a color of a political outfit, when you have another color that belongs to another political grouping, which is the NRM, and you're advising and warning against the red color.
And yesterday we saw at Kololo, there were a number of youths who belong to the patriotic clubs that the president was addressing in Kololo, and they were also putting on a berets, but these ones were different. They were yellow in color. The ones that actually Tamale Mirundi says belong to him, that the NRM
let's first dispense with the legality of that Gazette.
Me, I would have thought that if it was about the beret, even the yellow beret should have gone.
Let's first deal with the legality.
Okay.
Agatha, you are the lawyer on the panel. Section 164. I have read that section and read it against the Gazette. I don't know if there is harmony between the Gazette and Section 164. What belongs to the army, what doesn't belong to the army?
I think we should actually begin with 160. 160 that talks about what the army can denote as their property, and that has a lot to do with the mark, or even if not everything to do with the mark, and not a shape or a color. Before we came here, I was talking to Dictor and asking, they don't seem to even, they don't know what they are banning. Are they banning the shape of the cap, the color? Because when you know it's the shape, which is, or mark, which is what the Gazette, the notice says, you hear people like General Tumwine talk about the red movement. Did you hear him? The red movement, which is destabilizing countries. And for me, I was, when I asked Dictor, I said, is it the color, the shape, or the person? And we all know it is the person. So if Bob Wine came out today and came with a black t-shirt, let everyone wear black, they would try to ban that as well.
So you're making a stretch. You're assuming that they would actually ban that as well. Though the gazetted ones include black.
I am not assuming. We can read the law again and see what gives them the power to actually ban a red beret. The 160 that I am talking about says the minister shall declare and make known what mark or marks, and many other things, but those are not very important, and ends by saying, and denote them as property of the state. And we can also read 164 that you talk about. You are the one who has been rereading it. You can produce it for us verbatim. 164 talks about the people that will be found wearing what they talk about in 160. An unauthorized sale or wearing of uniforms.
ETC.
Yes, ETC. In this whole section and the previous one, 160, where do you see that a red beret being worn by people power can be banned, or they have power to own that and trademark it as the army uniform? Because I don't think anyone has power in these laws to say don't wear a certain color. So when you look at that, you try to understand what they are up to. You remember when FDC had started, no, it wasn't FDC. The black movement was by
the Black Monday.
The Black Monday movement.
By civil society.
By the civil society. It also created chaos. So for them, and we are used to that, to say without even fearing to contradict ourselves, that they will go after anything that threatens their grip on power, especially President Museveni. I do not think this is the FDC that came and said that. So what...
But what exactly do you think that the UPDF is trying to cure? Because from time immemorial, the military has defined its clothing, its uniform, and they have previously conducted raids. The red beret has been identified, has been identified as apparel for the military police. They have actually punished other units of the military if they put on that red beret. Is there some mischief? Is there some mischief, Dictor, that you think the UPDF is trying to protect? Because I'm trying us to avoid our analysis. No, our analysis swinging between the political interests of one group and against what now we are attaching together as part of the government, which is the army and the government, against what they see as a group opposed to them.
I guess you should say the state. I don't think that the army sat actually, that it was something that was very well considered. If you look at those two berets, the one of military police and the one of people power, they are different.
What's the difference?
Because
apart from the badge, what's the difference?
Forget the badge. There is a way that the one of military police is like low. It's low on the head, and the one of people power is almost like the South. You've seen South African women wearing those hat like. Yeah, so there is you can tell that there is a difference. Those two are not the same. That's one. Two, like Agatha has already said, this is not about the legality of wearing red berets. This is about its politics, and it's laughable for the UPDF to claim they are being professional here, because those two, first of all, they should have, it's the mark, not the color, because you cannot trademark colors. Because imagine if people were allowed to trademark colors, how many clothes would we have to wear without paying someone royalties? So that does not make sense, not at all. So it's really it's the politics. It's unfortunate that the
and
UPDF
there's no way we can discuss it without discussing the politics, because what the army has banned before from wearing was that army green, the real army uniform. I remember I owned a T-shirt like that, and one day I was in trouble with them. But for them to come out and say, and we are not sure actually now, the Gazette doesn't say this, we are against the color or the shape or the mark on it. They are just saying these red berets. So meaning that if someone...
They're saying these berets because they are 5 different berets they have put out. They're saying these 5.
So we now get that
their
the problem is a beret.
Their badge, their color. And they highlight the colors that they think, they said belong to the military.
Charles?
Yes.
From my side of things, like I said, I think the timing is the biggest problem. Because if you read the UPDF Act 164B, if you can just allow me to read it. It says, I'm quoting from an app, it says, unauthorized sale or wearing of uniforms, etc. Then it says, any person who, without authority, now goes to B, manufactures, sells, offers, or exposes for sale, or wears, or uses any uniform so nearly resembling the uniform referred to in paragraph A of this subsection as to be likely to deceive, or wears or uses any decoration supplied or authorized for use by a member of the defense forces, or any decoration so nearly resembling that decoration as to be likely to deceive, commits an offense and is on conviction liable to imprisonment not exceeding 7 years. So I think probably it's the resemblance that
because
if you look at the red beret, it resembles the beret worn by the military police. But then that's why for me I'm saying the UPDF, since this UPDF Act I'm talking about is of 2005, so one would ask a question, how long does it take for them to actually
so when did
no, if you look at
that's
so
where
nearly,
I see the problem.
So nearly, it's repeated in that subsection twice.
it gives them leeway to
Yes.
speak on anything.
Yes.
But we should ask ourselves a question. For us to arrive at a conclusion of whether this is politics or not, how long has Bob Wine and his people power people, for how long have they put on the red beret?
Since December 2017?
Was it December even? Even earlier than that?
No, about
before
between
even-
September.
Actually,
the
when-
red colour
when-
began with
when-
the
with
lifting
Bob-
of the
Yes, the red
Yes.
beret becomes
Yes.
something
So
when
you
the debate is
have-
on in Parliament.
But actually,
So
the
you
red
wait.
beret,
Mhm.
if you trace it backwards, the red beret was actually first worn by Munyagwa
Yeah,
way back.
earlier. But
Earlier.
Baminyagwa's wasn't a beret, it was those like...
There
that-
No,
were-
there
there
is-
were
But
two-
what
there
I'm
were two-
asking
there were
is-
two boys
what
who
I'm
used to work
asking
with
is-
Okay,
Munyagwa.
How, why does it take
Let me bring
2
some context
years?
here. Initially, during the debate on
On age
amending age limit, Article 105, subsection 2, some members of the opposition, actually I'm learning that using the word opposition in reference to a different political party or different political outfit is actually wrong. You don't hear for example, in America,
We are
referring
not
to
in
Republicans
America.
as in government and the Democratic Party as the opposition. They call them the Democratic Party. Someone, Munyagwa and a few other people came wearing what is known as fezes, the fez, which is an Islamic cape. There was protest
Semujunga and
by a section, Semujunganda, Mubarak Munyagwa,
Odonga Oto?
Odonga Oto, and a few others. On the day when the debate was intense, they brought in a number, and other people like the Tinka Similes and others were wearing those fezes as the symbol of those who were advocating Tojikwatako. And it quickly evolved into a beret because some section of the Muslims protested the wearing of the Islamic, what they call the Islamic dress.
Or the much
Now-
younger politician
No,
brought
actually,
in fashion
yeah.
and
Yes.
the
Yeah,
cooler
yeah, it's-
and
the
the
beret
cooler
looks
thing.
more fashionable. I think
cooler.
it's
Yes.
cooler, yeah.
No, some people will say they adjusted not to offend the religious sentiments of a section of the Muslims to modify
But
that dress into a
but
beret.
also
Now,
the red
um,
beret has always been a
between-
symbol of resistance. and
between
revolution. It has
December-
been one.
between December 2017 and September 2019, the military has also realized these guys had started by offending a section of Muslims. Now they're offending
Us.
the military.
They have just realized that they
I-
are being
it
offended.
appears.
No, but
But
I
that's
don't-
who are we
I don't-
kidding?
anyway,
It's
I-
just that after they have seen that it has become, like we said, fashionable, and every youth would want to identify and put on that, and it has caught like everyone that momentum. They have seen the threat, and it doesn't even pose to the military. No, I really take exception to believing that this is the
Yeah,
military
because-
thinking
Let's
I
listen
am
to Dicta.
being
No,
offended.
Let's listen to Dicta
you
here.
know, it's not possible that you'll confuse those two things. Like, because the military in our language, they call them Kamufu, military police. People call them Kamufu, yeah? So, like, people have always known what those people look like when they are wearing those red berets. People also know what people power red berets look like. The public is not confused. I am very sure that no one in the public has come out to say I am confused by these two dress
They can
codes."
create them.
No,
It's possible to create those who say they are confused.
Yes, but,
Yeah.
but the point is, if we are being genuine here, I don't think it has happened, and it would be nice if the UPDF can prove to us that there is someone where they've met a people power person and confused them for military police. It has not happened. We are sure. But secondly, if I was people power, and you could say that's giving up, but I just leave
Yeah,
the,
and you let
the,
it go.
the beret
In
thing.
fact, I wanted to.
Let it
I
go,
wanted
because
to.
it's not there is so much. Yes, there is debate about principle, but there is so much more that needs to be fought for. I am not sure that it's what they
No,
Charles, actually, I
Yes.
wanted us to discuss actually what does banning the beret actually take away from people power.
But who are...
Is there any serious
You
implication?
guys.
Because, for instance, I don't think people power, the gazetted it as their symbol, that it's something that as a registered political group that they were going to use in an election, and suddenly it has been taken away from them. I think beyond the red beret, people power has other issues that they stand for.
I am
that can
surprised.
actually
I'm
still propel
surprised.
them.
I'm surprised, Kenneth, that you
So-
said that because
so-
Even me, like,
in a political
really?
contestation, You give an inch, they take a meter.
Yeah, that's
Because
You
what,
give a meter,
That's true.
they take a mile. If people
What
power
will you do if
begins,
they come
if
and
people,
ban
if
quotes
people
and
power begins and
become-
says, okay, they have said we can't use this. Remember the debate around the removal of term limits, 2005. When political groups started forming what was known as 24C, you remember?
A4C,
A4C.
that
eh,
was
yes.
2011.
In
A4C is
2011.
2011?
Walk
Yes,
to work.
they kept banning formations that were emerging
Yes.
with Matthias Impuga. Matthias Impuga was the leader of F4C. They kept banning one group after another. Minister of Internal Affairs would come out and say, this one is an illegal society. This one is an illegal society. If you keep giving that space,
No, Charles,
Ivan Bowe,
Charles,
to know how much they can
Ivan Bowe
ban,
has
they
gone to
banned
court.
prayers. Prayers.
Ivan
of
Bowe
every
has
day.
gone to court.
But then I saw Bobby Wine himself saying that people power is much bigger than the beret, which sends some signal that without the beret they can still operate and evolve into something more serious than the symbols. Though they still consider the beret as the symbol of unity and resistance. That's what he kept on saying. So I want to agree with Victor here, who says that beyond the red beret, can people power still function? And I think they can
Agatha
still-
doesn't seem to agree with both of you.
Can I-
Sure. Because if you allow them ban the red beret today, tomorrow they will come and ban. Who knows what else they will keep on banning? Because we have a constitution that gives people rights, freedoms. If you are going to say today, they have said don't step here, and I have not, because you can do it. You can do it and go home and sit. But how long? What precedent are you setting that you will have a state or a president that wakes up and says don't eat today and you don't breathe today and you don't?
Victor.
No,
No, wait.
Let Victor here defend her
Agatha.
position.
How do we,
Kenneth, hold
I
it.
think the biggest point also is
Kenneth,
how,
hold it.
how do we reconcile the political sentiments with the law? Because the UPDF is relying on the UPDF Act.
Is the
to actually do
UPDF?
this.
No, but we-
The question is,
No one. Okay, so Kenneth, let's agree that no one agrees that this
That
is
they should
about
do that.
no one thinks
that
no one
it's
is
about the law.
fooled.
And it's justified.
Yeah, no one is fooled about this being a matter of the law. We know it's not the law, but I sometimes it's very annoying that the NRM cannot sit down with all the resources they have and come up with a plausible way of defeating their opposition. Here's the thing: red is the color of the Uganda People's Congress. The Uganda People's Congress is a de facto member of the NRM. Get the Uganda People's Congress
Uganda
to call
People's Congress is an independent political party.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well, they are. Anyway, my point here is there was
You are insulting
easier-
the UPC people.
there was an easier way to do this, because I mean, let's agree that Akena and Betty Amongi are members of the
UPC
NRM.
did complain about the
No,
red
but
colour
that's
one
the
time
thing.
when it
But
started.
that's the thing. Here's what they could have done. They could have facilitated the UPC to sue People Power, or sue Bobby Wine or whatever, to give up their color.
You already said, and rightly so, that no one can have rights over a color. And,
Victor.
and
No.
even claim.
Yeah, I agree,
Victor,
but
let me give you some facts.
I agree,
I actually
know.
picked this yesterday from the former member of parliament for Machindi West, I think, Simbwa, John Simbwa.
East, I believe.
Yes, Makinde East, I think. He was saying, yellow is the color of the Catholic Church. Yellow is also the color of the National Resistance Movement. What you guys are not talking about is that when the red beret was made popular by People Power, a section within the National Resistance Movement supporters tried to promote the yellow
Yeah,
beret.
beret.
I think people like Tamale Mirundi,
Actually,
Bobby
Tamale-
Wine, Tamale Mirundi,
believes it's
Baby
it's
Cool.
innovation.
Remember the guy that
Tamale
claimed to have
Mirundi.
been nailed?
yes, Tamale Mirundi, Baby Cool, I think, who was the other one? The music promoter, Bargahara, Balam. Yes, and others also tried to popularize the yellow beret. Some members of parliament, women members of parliament and activists also put on the yellow beret. it didn't pick up.
No, actually it did. There is a guy at this stage opposite Uganda House. Every once in a while I pass by and you see people are starting to wear the yellow beret.
And even
But-
yesterday,
But
yes,
if
let
you-
me-
if
let
you're
me-
talking
let
in
me
terms of-
even yesterday
let me
was
complete my
massively
point.
won in
That
Kololo.
this is a political contest. It wasn't so that UPC could win a case. It would have been a political, because then you insinuate that people power does not have ideas. They are only jumping on other people's ideas, whether it's in terms of color or whatever. But it was much easier to discredit people power by bringing UPC on board and then facilitating them whichever way to take back their color, ownership of their color,
But you
than
see-
it would have
see,
been.
Victor,
Then it would.
I don't think UPC has a monopoly on the red color.
No, I'm not saying they have a monopoly,
Yeah.
Kenneth. I am saying that if they came out and spoke loudly enough about it, and then maybe the usual corrupt way that sometimes this government operates, they can help them out and then push people power on sort
But
of a
how?
more
How?
legitimate.
If they went to court, which judge is going to go on the side of UPC and do the maneuvers that they
No,
have
I think,
always?
do you want to clog the judicial system with hopeless cases,
But
like a
even
fight
now-
over a
But
color
even now it has
between
resulted into
political-
a case.
Yeah?
Even now it
Charles,
has
the
resulted
the
into
point
a
I'm
case.
making, I am not supporting NRM, I'm not supporting the UPDF. I'm just saying that these people have easier, more plausible ways to do stupid things, I'm sorry to say, than to come up to abuse the UPDF, which should be a respected institution.
Okay, we need to take a quick
Charles.
commercial break, but I'm going to read section 164 in total, in full, for our viewers to
Start
understand.
with 60, please.
Hmm?
Start with 60.
You
160.
read 160 already. You did read 160 already. 164, Kenneth read a bit of it. Unauthorized sale or wearing of uniform, etc. 1. Any person who, without authority, A, sells, offers, or exposes for sale, or wears or uses any uniform supplied to or authorized for use by any member of the defense forces, manufactures, sells, offers or exposes for sale, wears or uses any uniform or so nearly resembling the uniform referred to in paragraph A of this subsection as to be likely to deceive or You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and we're discussing events that dominated news headlines during the last week. We started with the Red Berets and the Gazette by the Uganda People's Defense Forces of what it calls colors or shapes of berets that belong to it. The interpretation, of course, has been marks. The interpretation has been, is the army targeting the people power movement? But moving from that, President Yoweri Museveni, people say, I find a little bit of difficulty with this. Well, he's the president, so he's the chief executive. He has announced salary enhancements for various categories of workers, though sometimes the media representation of some of these policy positions looks like it's coming out of the generosity of the individual called the president.
It's not the media
But
representation.
it's not the media. It's those things. The president writes letters, signs
the
them. So what
person
are we
himself.
supposed to do?
Okay. Okay, maybe that makes sense. But enhancement of salaries from the public service. Deputy, let me see, the Deputy Secretary to the Treasury moves from 3,419,578 shillings to 13,860. So it looks cool to work for government again, I think some people will say. The Accountant General also moves from 3,419,000 to 13 million. Deputy Secretary to the Public Service Commission moves from 3 million to 13 million point 8. The Auditor General, Internal Auditor General, there's a difference between the Auditor General and Internal Auditor General. The Internal Auditor General moves also from 3,419,578 to 13,860,000. Medical workers, because the others have never gone on strike. It's medical workers, and you can see on the screen behind us we have Dr. Obuku Ekwaro, chairman of the Ghana Medical Workers Association. The medical workers went on repeated strikes to demand for salary enhancement. And now there seems to be some response to that. The Director General of Health Services moves from 6 million to 9 million. Director National Referral Hospital moves from 5.5 million to 8 million. Director Specialized Health Institute from 5.5 million to 8 million. Director Regional Referral Hospitals move from 4.8 million to 7.4 million. A director moves from 3.75 to 7.6. Deputy Director National Referral Hospital Specialized Health Institute moves from 4.6 million to 7.37 million. A senior consultant moves from 4.5 million to 7.3 million. Commissioner from 3,050,000 shillings to 7.3 million. A consultant from 4.2 to 6 million. Assistant director from 4.5 to 5 million. District health officer from 2.7 million to 5 million. No, to 4.6 million. Assistant commissioner 2.7 to 4.6 million. Principal medical officer from 3.7 to 4.5. Now, the list goes on. Also for judicial officers, there's been significant enhancement. For example, the chief registrar would move from 5 million to 15 million. It jumps 3 times for the chief registrar. And the registrar moves from 5 million, it doubles to 10.5 million. A deputy registrar moves from 4.49 to 9.8. That's slightly more than doubling. Assistant registrar from 3.9 to 7.5 million. What do these enhancements mean? Can they satisfy the demand for a living wage for government workers? The timing of these announcements, and does this resolve long-standing issues, especially in the following departments: in the medical, education, teachers, and judicial officers, because these are the ones that have gone on strike. Victor, let me start with you.
Charles, as an economist or former economist, I think it's a good thing that there's been a salary enhancement. It's good for the economy. Our economy is sort of like there is not enough money, and if the government can, but the question is, if they make these enhancements, will they be able to pay? Because we know that in many cases, the government does not always meet its obligations. The amount of areas that already exist are very high. So for me, but if the government can manage to pay these salaries, it's probably a good thing. That said, I think the salary enhancement mostly targeted science teachers, science professionals, and with a few exceptions. And I think that's wrong, because it creates disparities that you do not want. Yeah, we know that our system is already inefficient, but that inefficiency can only increase as a result of selectively handling certain groups of people a certain way. You should have a salary scale, follow that salary scale. That's important for how the civil service will function. I also remember at some point the president promised us, and so cabinet promised that they would review salaries of everyone, have the same scale for everyone. What happened? Did the power brokers break that deal? Because the promise was that by November 2017, this issue would have been resolved. They would have reviewed everyone's salary and made sure there was uniformity, so that people who are paid off the consolidated fund are not paid differently. And now what we see is that we are digging a deeper hole, because as far as I know, our taxes are barely funding anything out of recurrent budget. Now you have increased salaries. It's a good thing for the economy, but will you be able to afford it?
How good is it? Yes, and that's the question, can we afford it? We still have our development budget largely funded
From
by
either
either
China
donations or borrowing.
Yeah.
There was a WhatsApp that was circulating, which I needed us to mix with this, that a dozen diplomats or ambassadors, especially from the West, met and have given an ultimatum to government. No, they haven't given an ultimatum. They have told government they will not do any funding.
For
They
budget support.
For budget support.
Because budget support is negligible. So if they are going to make a stand, I think a stand has to be made in a different place. Budget support on our is I think less than $1 billion or something.
But
so budget support is negligible. But and there have been claims by some ministers that this didn't happen. But what I know that I've been in meetings where the donors, the Western donors, are increasingly becoming uncomfortable with this thing that we talked about earlier, of the president sitting in the State House, being lobbied by a few people, and then after he has been lobbied by a few people, making decisions that are sometimes anti-Uganda, so to speak. Some of these donors want the system to be able to work.
Someone will argue, Dick, and say they call them development partners. I think that's the preferred word within government circles.
Yes.
Instead of donors, government officials and the president have been arguing and saying that they do not donate to us. We donate to them more. But the argument has been, can they love this country more than citizens of this country?
Yeah, no, but
the country being run by the citizens of this country.
Because, I mean, Ugandans are ignored. I mean, there are some very good examples. Let's take the OTT and mobile money taxes. Ugandans are ignored at every turn when they come up to complain about something. So the issue of the citizens being on the side of this is not necessarily true. We know that power lies with a certain group of people, and that's where and that's the problem.
If you think, I don't know what you think, Kenneth. Are these kinds of salaries? The president has been arguing for a long time that we can't pay better salaries because we are focusing on infrastructure. Where did that argument disappear?
We finished.
Well, first of all, from
have we finished our infrastructure investment?
First of all, going by the list you read and the increments that have been made, one thing I was asking
I didn't
myself,
read for judges.
You did
the Chief Justice jumps from 20 million to 26 million.
Well,
Deputy Chief Justice from 18 to 25. Principal Judge from 17 to 24. Justice of the Supreme Court from 9 to 23. Justice of Court of Appeal from 9 to 23. Judge of the High Court from 9 to 22 million.
Well, my argument in this, and my concern in particular, is about the lower cadre. People actually get peanuts and are still in the same economy, like the people who are going to get 17 million, 23 million. You find that in some cases, the people who are in the lower range actually spend much more than even those who are in the upper side, because on top of those salaries, these people are entitled to allowances and all sorts of things. And some of those allowances actually are almost equal to the salary that the lower cadre is receiving. And we have all seen that it is the lower cadre who have been at the forefront of demanding for better pay. So it would have been more interesting to see them moving from the lowest level they are in to at least a bigger percentage. But from what you're reading, I'm seeing that the guys who have actually been taking good amounts of money are the ones that are getting
being added.
Are being added.
Yeah? To those who have more
rationalization becomes a problem. And I just want to agree with Agatha, who asked a question here. Was it Agatha? It was Dick actually, who talked about the Salary Review Commission. At the height of the strikes, President Museveni said he wouldn't accept people who are clamoring for salary increment unless it was rationalized. I remember he actually sanctioned he actually directed the Minister of Public Service to work hand in hand with the Minister of Finance to actually look at the salary scales. And then there was a demand from Parliament that there should be a salary review commission, and it was agreed the salary review commission will be put in place so that it will do clearly make sure that there is no unfairness in the way salaries are being handled. I have not seen that. And then it becomes much more a problem when the decisions to actually increase the salaries are actually based on a directive being issued by somebody. And that begs the question you put in about the timing. What does this mean? And of course, people will tell you between now and 2021, most of the decisions that are being made actually target the election, appease a certain section of people so that they can actually rally with you as opposed to rational thinking and looking at what should actually be done.
What is irrational? Government appears in this case, to me, caught between a rock and a hard place. They don't pay better salaries, they are criticized.
Exactly.
They increase the salaries, they are still criticized. I'll give you some example. You talked about the lower cadre. Grade 2 magistrate is moved from 850,000 to 1.2 million shillings. Senior grade 2 magistrate from 1.2 million to 2 million. Magistrate grade 1 or principal magistrate from 1.7 million, 3.2. Another category, state prosecutor, moves from 850 to 1 million shillings. Senior state prosecutor from 1.2 to 1.7 million. State attorney from 1.7 to 2.7 million shillings. Teachers, there's a rank, a grade of teachers called assistant tutor. Because now they changed the classroom teachers also are categorized because they're supposed to be able to move, even if they don't move on what they do, but in terms of ranking for their salary enhancement, moves from 763,000 to 832. A tutor or instructor moves from 1,045,000 to 1,102,000. A senior tutor or instructor from 1.45 to 1.496.
You are talking about tutors, and I'm thinking those are these people who teach in institutions like colleges.
No, there is a ranking.
And
Even a senior education officer can teach in a primary in P3, and they will be called senior
But just
education
look at
officer.
the figure. You have just read it there that somebody has moved from 700 to 800. And then you're reading the figure of a permanent secretary that moves from 3 million to 17 million to 13 million. Can you imagine? Is that rational?
You know, Charles.
Yes.
On top of this senior government official getting a car, getting fuel, getting allowances, you know, imagine the gap from someone who is earning 800.
But the training and responsibility.
Somebody is earning 800,000. They pay for their rent, they feed their children, they have to take their children to school, they are using the same amount. Then you have an official of government who is receiving 13 million, who has a car. Some of them even have a privilege of having their children on scholarship. Do you see any rational thinking?
Welcome back this last segment of the Fourth Estate. The East African community is in trouble. The trouble is members of that form the governments of East Africa, that form the East African community, are not paying their due to run the secretariat. The figures are staggering. The default rates are staggering. One nation, one member state, owes the community 27.6 million United States dollars. Another owes 13.7 million. Another owes 8.4 million. Another owes 7.1. Another owes 9.2 million. Only Uganda owes only 2.2 million because Uganda made a payment of $6 million to match up what the so the others have been really not paying up. This one, which owes 27.6 million, has not paid a penny since they joined. The other one that owes 13.7 has paid some but doesn't pay much. So it has paid only like half since they joined, since they've been part of this outfit that sits in Arusha, Tanzania. When he had just assumed power, President John Pombe Magufuli railed against the East African community and was asking about the allowances, about the structure, about its effectiveness. Is the dream of a united East Africa? Victor, you cover the East African community very closely. I want to start with you, and I want you to lead the discussion here. What is going on? What does this mean?
Let me just say that it's not surprising that this is happening, because for a long time the East African community was funded by donors, 70% from the development partners, like you like to say, and 30% from the EAC. So let's start there, and then talk about the image problem that the EAC now faces. The EAC, having had President Museveni stay for as long as he has, having brought on board South Sudan, having Burundi, having President Kagame also change his constitution to stay over in power, has alienated the Europeans, who are the EAC's biggest funders. This money has since moved mostly to IGAD, which has sort of created an image as better at managing peace negotiations, because when the EAC was supposed to negotiate Burundi, they failed. Nkurunziza is still in power. So IGAD has sort of also not dealt with the issue of South Sudan, but every time I've talked to donors, the donors, and I mean some of them, including the European Union, have said the problem is the leaders of South Sudan, and they are not. And so that's the problem of the EAC. One, it has an image problem because of the kind of leadership it has. Two, it has a problem. I for one don't understand why South Sudan was admitted into the EAC, because it does not meet the standards that were set by the EAC treaty to admit a country. A country has to be
it was
peaceful.
fast-tracked.
Yeah, yes, and a country has to be peaceful, has to be democratic, has to, be a country worth calling it a country. South Sudan is a mess.
So for our viewers, South Sudan is the biggest defaulter at 27.6 million. Since it joined the community, it has not paid a penny into the community because of its troubles.
Yes. So that's one of the problem. The second one is the EAC promised to be a people-centered organization. As it stands now, it's driven by the leaders. If the whims of the leaders feel like we should do this, they do it. If they don't feel like it, they don't. And that's the other problem. That having realized that the first EAC collapsed because it was about the leaders, the EAC promised us a people-centered, a business-led, people-centered organization. They have failed on that. And so that makes it worse. I mean, you, Charles, I don't care if Uganda does not pay EAC. And I mean, I am invested, but I don't care.
Why is it that Uganda pays the most? Or tries at least to pay to meet
not
its
always.
obligation?
I think they were embarrassed, because remember at some point, not long ago, a month or two ago, they were behind Rwanda. Like they were only better than Burundi and South Sudan. So it's not always the case, but I think when that happened, because President Museveni has always pushed for the political federation, he's supposed to be the EAC, the leader of the EAC, so to speak, then money was allocated and it was sent there. But the people of the East African community, they have had some benefits, but some of those benefits have been snatched away anyway. And now I'm talking about Rwanda closing borders with Uganda and the fights with Burundi. So people who are fairly close, have relations, cannot move freely. But otherwise,
Tanzania has been deporting or harassing workers, professionals from other countries.
Yes, actually, I do have a sister who was forced to leave Tanzania because she just could not stand the stress. And that's the point, that the things that the EAC promised have not been delivered. And thirdly, right now they also have a problem of a Secretary General who is, I am going to say this on TV, but anyway, he's incompetent. And that's a problem. That's like a bigger problem.
Is he actually incompetent, or because he's a Burundi national, and Burundi hasn't been one of the best performing in terms of meeting its dues, that other member countries have not given Mfumukeko the support that he needed to be able to function effectively?
That's not it. When that man took over, he came and promised to manage expenses of the EAC. Because at the time when Richard Sezibera left, there was an issue of corruption that had put off the European Union. When he came, he simply cut how often the EAC interacted with citizens of the different countries, and then a report by the signed by Secretary Generals of EAC ministries in the region showed he was using money of the EAC to travel and see his wife in the US, spend most of his time in Burundi. So you can say they have.
Some of the arguments I've had is Burundi has been complaining that the other members of the region, of the bloc, have not been kind to it because they have been lobbied largely by Rwanda to not support, and they have not gotten as much support as they needed. But let me bring in Agatha here. Two things for me, Agatha. One is just last week, we're discussing here a letter by President Museveni to Ugandans and especially the Bazukulu over the sanctions against Kale Kaihura. And now, yes, and by the way, Kale Kaihura did speak out a little. Ofono Pondo went to visit him in Kashagama, and at least we know a bit of his story now. But And the president was railing against who wants to go to the West. Why? What is important? Why do you think that would be a big punishment? And you find that regional blocks that are supposed, that are formed on the principle that Africans should find solutions to Africans' problems, to Africa's problems. From NEPAD, NEPAD has collapsed because Western funding to NEPAD stopped. The East African community is failing because 70% of its dues were paid for by the European Union. IGAD shot some prominence when it was the Intergovernmental Authority on Desertification and something. Then it changed to the Intergovernmental Authority on Development and was struggling for some time because favor of the people who put in the money shifts depending on what is in the interest at a particular time. They also not pay. The African Union is heavily funded by the West. Without Western funding, the African Union struggles. When Gaddafi died in 2011, it was found that he was paying, Libya was sponsoring subscription and membership fees for at least 13 smaller countries on this continent. You can say the same about ECOWAS, you can say the same about COMESA, you can say the same about all these regional blocks. What is this joke about African leaders who are supposed to be running these things, failing to run the things they put up, and then talk big about
the UN?
Yes, no, talk big about sovereignty. If you can't manage and pay your dues for this. By the way, the East African community, almost year in, year out, they'll put notices on their notes board to say, we are sorry we are unable to pay salaries. Allowances go for months without being paid. Salaries go for months without being paid because the members are not meeting their due. What is this about?
Which is what I wondered when I
Uganda
saw
will be 57 years on Tuesday.
when I saw that we are going to discuss countries not meeting their financial obligations to the community. And the reason I wondered is, since when have the countries, the member states, been the ones making it stand anyway? Because when you look at all its budgetary allocations from, at least even if you go 7 years, it's been funded more than 50% by these donor countries. And the same, like you said, goes for the African Union. So the issue now, we shouldn't be discussing that its collapses because Uganda has, the countries, the member states have failed. We should be discussing more why the development partners no longer think it's worth putting in their money. And the other thing is that, like international law, all international law, the East African Community Treaty that establishes the East African Community is largely unenforceable. So while you have Article 132, is it 132? Yes, 132.4, that says its financing is going to be largely by member states. It's not, how do you enforce that? And you go to, I think, 134, that says that member states that don't meet these financial obligations action should be taken against them. They don't even define action, but that action is supposed to be discussed by the summit. So how do you now see
agreed upon
by the council
through
in consensus? How now do you sit with the summit, the presidents of the countries that are not contributing, and expect that they will agree that there is going to be action taken? Because me, I think you kick out South Sudan, kick out Burundi.
They should never have been there in the first place.
The other thing is that if you're looking at it, the political will, the commitment in our countries is so low. Not even look at
I'll tell you something. Whenever a particular president is the chair of the summit, their country moves quickly to pay. And the summits, by the way, get postponed. They can run. You can miss a quarter. They are scheduled.
They are supposed to be April and November.
April and November. But
they haven't happened like
yes,
that in a very long time.
They keep missing the deadlines. And when a country, depending on which country it is, when they are the president of that country.
Chair? Who took over from Rwanda?
It's still Rwanda.
Still Rwanda. And Rwanda took over from Uganda.
From Uganda.
No, look, what I was saying is that there's a meeting that happened last year that was supposed to agree on the financing model. Do we keep depending on partner states that are not willing, that haven't shown any commitment to contribute,
South
or do
Sudan
we devise?
doesn't have money.
Or do we devise other means? And some of the countries, like Burundi, were saying, no, you cannot punish a defaulting member. So someone is saying, let
So
me
consensus
punish,
is lost.
let me default without facing any consequence. In the end, people will want to get the benefits out of it, but not meet their obligations.
Kenneth, let me come to you. This whole thing of the community, if without Trademark East Africa,
Yeah, thank you.
How would
The
our
economic-
lives change?
the economic provisions and benefits that are supposed to come with it wouldn't be anywhere, because the governments on their own, one, they have those non-tariff barriers that they keep slapping against each other. The common border posts have all been built by Trademark East Africa. They're supposed to be building another for South Sudan.
Yeah,
They're
they,
supposed to be doing
they have
some.
built so many things.
Yes.
Because when they said the single customs territory,
Yes.
it failed until Trademark East Africa came, built the one-stop border posts, provided technology for taxation so that people could read each other's taxes across countries, provided technology and paid for it for people to track their goods, so that you can reduce the need for web bridges and so on and so forth. So yeah,
So
Trademark
what are we talking about?
and again, that's the West paying, giving money to Trademark East Africa. So.
And even if you talk about Trademark East Africa, they are also the donors.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah,
it's
it's
the West
World
paying
Bank,
for
it's the UK, it's like that.
At the end of the day, it's really very confusing. But even beyond the contributions that we are discussing here, even when you look at the treaty and what it says about the decisions taken in Arusha, the treaty envisages that decisions taken, for instance, in the East African Legislative Assembly should supersede the decisions taken at home
By individual parliaments.
by individual parliaments, which means a law that has been passed, for instance, by the East African Legislative Assembly should be more powerful than a law passed by the local.
The Ugandan parliament.
And there are also issues about the decisions taken by the summit or the Council of Ministers. But if you look at the rate at which they are implemented, that clearly shows you how unserious the regional bloc is. There is a slow pace in actualizing the decisions that are taken. There's a slow pace in even addressing small issues to the extent that they are allowed to become much bigger.
Thank you. We will not complete these issues of the East African
So
community.
it's a very big issue that I think it's
I just want to...
it's beyond imagination, and one would actually think if the budget of the East African community is actually sponsored by the West, the same people in the West are the same people we are negotiating with about trade deals, and at the end of the day we start complaining how unfair they are to us, and yet they are the ones who are actually making us stand out. It really complicates the situation.
Well, I think as Uganda celebrates 57 years of independence, these are things we need to think about. This sovereignty, without for political reasons, and everybody's telling you, we are a sovereign state, we are a sovereign state. When you can't meet your own obligations on basic things, it's something we need to reevaluate. Not just for Uganda, but across this continent of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to end this discussion. About 2-3 things that we didn't talk about that I think I need to get a comment from each one of you. You can choose what you want to talk about. One is that the Uganda Communications Commission is assuming a role, we talked about this before, many months ago, directing and giving guidelines on advertising on media houses. Who sponsors your news? Who sponsors the Fourth Estate? We don't have a sponsor yet for the Fourth Estate, but people advertise in the Fourth Estate. Who sponsors? Is the Uganda Communications Commission working within its mandate? Can it regulate how private businesses should run their business? And yes, its job is to regulate the industry, but the conduct of to determine who is being what would you call it?
I think their job is to regulate content.
Mm-hmm.
What has the sponsor got to do with the content?
Maybe we'll ask that. Then the other thing is there was that directive, a very exciting directive, by the way, on the law of idle and disorderly, and an interesting letter that the Inspector General of Police wrote immediately after. His Excellency the President has directed that henceforth no arresting of people for being under the law of order
Sense of idle and
idle and disorderly, and those who are in jail should be released immediately. A quick comment from each one of you, and we'll get out of here. Our time is out. Starting with you, Agatha.
Well, I think in itself, it's a good thing to stop arresting people on charges that are really not defined of idle and disorderly. But how do you know someone is idle? Can't I sit in the Freedom Square? What is it called? Constitutional Square and rest.
Constitution Square.
Oh, not Constitutional
No, it's
Square.
not constitutional.
It's Constitution Square.
Okay, okay. So in itself, it's a good thing that someone recognizes that people shouldn't be, because I was seeing that about 1,000 people in Kampala alone were in cells over that offense. The problem here is that if you have, and that's what I said earlier, that we have a president who is misusing or abusing presidential directives. If you have a president who wakes up and says, I am directing you do this, because initially they were not binding. That's why, because he has said this before in the State of the Nation address in 2017, but no one moved. I think even
But
then,
he can invoke his
first of all,
prerogative power.
even then, Martin Okosa-Ochola, when he was deputy IGP, came out and announced that the president has said this, but I don't know why it didn't create as much hurrah then, maybe because now Marema Bilis has taken him on. There's a point of invoking his prerogative powers, but what precedent, like I said before, are you setting to the rule of law? What is the implication that will have? That you'll have a president who wakes up and says, today don't do this, today I am instructing that. It's really a recipe
he
for
invokes
danger.
those powers within the legal provisions
Has he?
that allow him in his office.
What?
Yes, he does. I think he did. He could change significant policy
No,
issues.
because the presidential directives are not binding. In 2013, they had even moved cabinet to draft a law that would make them binding. That was fought by everyone, saying you are creating an autocracy. Right now, what the president should have done when he realized that, or even the others, that this law was outdated and punitive, would say, let's draft a bill and repeal and amend the Penal Code Act that
Thank
provides
you.
for this.
Kenneth, we need to move on.
Two things. I think the Uganda Communication Commission, its focus should only be on the content. Is what is being advertised something that would be dangerous to the public or something like that? The ethics of it. Beyond that, I don't see any other bigger role they can play. On the idle and disorderly thing, the most honest thing to do is the president to move parliament to deal with the Penal Code Act, because that's how serious he would be. He should be, if he's really serious about having the thing removed, because we run a risk of the president becoming the law instead of the law itself being worked on. So
Victor?
Deal with the Penal Code Act and not the presidential directives.
I want to shape the idle and disorderly directive in a different way. First, we've come full circle. We used to talk about Idi Amin being a president of decrees. At least he had no parliament where he had no money to spend. Now we have a president who does that too. There are so many laws, and I'd include the one on vending that are being used to exploit our poor, the poorest people, especially in urban areas. There is a court at KCCA where people sit, no lawyers. Sometimes the judge will call people in chambers. People have no chance. You either admit to, even when it's not true or not, and pay the fine, because then the fine will be little, or you end up in jail, or you are asked to pay money you cannot afford. That's something the president should be dealing with, not in this ad hoc manner that he's doing. And on UCC has become that institution which actively works to collapse the media, while allowing other departments, other institutions under it to do with it to the public whatever they want. And here I'm talking about the telecommunications, I'm talking about cable TV. Those groups do whatever they want with the media, unreasonable decisions. Because I used to watch Citizen Kenya, but then at some point the adverts were too much. I stopped watching. That's what happens in a rational market, in a private market. People will know that these adverts are too much. You can regulate which adverts to appear, but not regulate how long adverts are supposed to appear and where. And for me, that's
I actually find that ridiculous, because people have complained. I worked with a radio station before, and when we did a survey, that's many years ago, one of the consultants said this radio is identified as an announcements radio because the radio was running too many public announcements. And that was a put-off for listeners. And the listeners were able to communicate that when you begin running announcements in every segment, or you're running announcements that are running for so long, you do not retain listenership. And the industry is able to regulate itself that way. I do not think it is in the place, UCC is in its place to regulate advertising. We've had newspapers in this market that were only advertisements. You remember the what was it called? The Advertise or something? It ran no news, it ran only adverts. It was distributed for free. It collapsed within months of its being established because consumers know what to consume, and the professionals that run these
So they
businesses,
should be the deciders.
they should be the deciders, not
for me, I find it surprising that
Market
the
forces.
telecom communications will exploit us on internet, on calls, on everything, and you can report to UCC however much you want. Nothing will be done. That UCC
you
works
have a
up-
lot of dropped calls.
Yeah, you have
Nobody
no-
pays for them.
There's a
And
1%
internet that doesn't
profit margin
work,
that is
they will
given
promise
to
you a
UCC
certain amount of
from
internet and
telecoms.
not deliver.
Shuts them up.
All UCC promises when they were negotiating with the pay TV companies, promises us that we will stop paying for local channels. And then UCC cracks a deal where we are, in fact, those companies increased payment for subscription, and UCC did not deliver on its promise. But those companies, we are still paying for local channels, and in this region, we are the only ones that do that. And so that's the problem. UCC fails to do its role as a regulator, and only does that which they think they are going to punish the media because they feel they are unhappy with the media.
If you have a standard decoder from a pay TV, when your subscription runs out, the only channel they will leave you with
is UBC.
local channels is UBC.
Yeah.
And yet, NTV and all the other stations
Are free to
are
air.
free to air channels. Who regulates that? When they regulate it, I have no idea.
No, UCC at some
UCC
point
is supposed
promised us that those channels would be free because that's the standard the world over. Then they cracked a deal and we are still paying.
Our time is out. We need to get out of here. On the Aido and disorderly law, my own comment is, you can't have this contradiction within the legal regime of a country. You are arresting people for what you call illegal assembly, a relic of colonialism. When they banned three Karamojong from working together, if you found three Karamojong working together, they had committed an offense and they could be prosecuted. You keep some of those under laws like the Public Order Management Act and enforce them unfairly, and then you come and say, stop arresting people for being idle and disorderly. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Our time is out. We need to get out of here. Thank you very much, Agatha Ateire, independent journalist and lawyer. Thank you very much, Kenneth Anderson Lukwago from Radio 1. Thank you very much, Dictor Simwe from the East African. Thank you very much to all our viewers for joining us tonight. And always, I have been receiving messages from some of you. We haven't been able to take those messages. I received messages after the discussions here. We haven't been able to take them. We will advise when we are able to relay your feedback, but that feedback will be available. I think in the meantime, it will be available on our social media. It will be run.
On Facebook, I think.
Yeah, Twitter and Facebook. Your comments should be able to run there, but we'll advise on whether we can take those comments on air or not. From me, it's a good night and a very happy 57th Independence Anniversary to all you, the people of Uganda, and those who live here. Good night.